Chapter 3. The Gnani. Many of the Sri Ramana's visitors appeared to have an insatiable curiosity about the state of self-realization, and they were particularly interested to know how a Gnani experienced himself and the world around him. Some of the questions he was asked on the subject reflected the bizarre notions that many people had about this state, but most of them tended to be variations of one of the four following questions. 1. How can a Gnani function without any individual awareness of consciousness? 2. How can he say that he does nothing, a statement which Sri Ramana often made, when others see him active in the world? 3. How does he perceive the world? Does he perceive the world at all? 4. How does the Gnani's awareness of pure consciousness relate to the alternating states of body and mind consciousness experienced in waking, dreaming, and sleeping? The hidden premise behind all such questions is the belief that there is a person, the Gnani, who experiences a state he calls the self. The assumption is not true. It is merely a mental construct devised by those who have not realized the self, ajnanis, to make sense of the Gnani's experience. Even the use of the word Gnani is indicative of this erroneous belief, since it literally means a knower of jnana, the reality. The ajnani uses this term because he imagines that the world is made up of seekers of reality and knowers of reality. The truth of the self is that there are neither jnanis nor ajnanis. There is only jnana. Sri Ramana pointed this out both directly and indirectly on many occasions, but few of his questioners were able to grasp, even conceptually, the implications of such a statement. Because of this, he usually adapted his ideas in such a way that they conformed to the prejudices of his listeners. In most of the conversations in this chapter, he accepts that his questioners perceive a distinction between the Gnani and the ajnani, and without challenging the basis of that assumption, he assumes the role of the Gnani and attempts to explain the implications of being in that state. Then what is the difference between the baddha and mukta, the bound man and the one liberated? The ordinary man lives in the brain, unaware of himself in the heart. The jnana siddha, Gnani, lives in the heart. When he moves about and deals with men and things, he knows that which he sees is not separate from the one supreme reality, the Brahman, which he realized in the heart as his own self, the real. What about the ordinary man? I have just said that he sees things outside himself. He is separate from the world, from his own deeper truth, from the truth that supports him and what he sees. The man who has realized the supreme truth of his own existence realizes that it is the one supreme reality that is there behind him, behind the world. In fact, he is aware of the one as the real, the self in all selves, in all things, eternal and immutable, in all that is impermanent and mutable. What is the relation between the pure consciousness realized by the Gnani and the I amness, which is accepted as the primary datum of experience? The undifferentiated consciousness of pure being is the heart or hridayam, which is what you really are. From the heart arises the I amness as the primary datum of one's experience. By itself, it is completely pure, Suddha Sattva, in character. It is in this form of pristine purity, Suddha Sattva Swarupa, uncontaminated by rajas and tamas, activity and inertia, that the I appears to subsist in the Gnani. In the Gnani, the ego subsists in the pure form, and therefore it appears as something real. Am I right? The appearance of the ego in any form, either in the Gnani or Ajnani, is itself an experience. But to the Ajnani, who is deluded into thinking that the waking state and the world are real, the ego also appears to be real. Since he sees the Gnani act like other individuals, he feels constrained to posit some notion of individuality with reference to the Gnani also. How then does the aham vritti, I thought, the sense of individuality, function in the Gnani? It does not function in him at all. The Gnani's real nature is the heart itself, because he is one, and identical with the undifferentiated pure consciousness referred to by the Upanishads as the prajnana, full consciousness. Prajnana is truly Brahman, the Absolute, and there is no Brahman other than prajnana. Does a Gnani have sankalpas, desires? The main qualities of the ordinary mind are tamas and rajas, sloth and excitement. Hence it is full of egotistic desires and weaknesses. But the Gnani's mind is Shuddha Sattva, pure harmony, and formless, functioning in the subtle Vijnana Maya Kosha, the sheath of knowledge, through which he keeps contact with the world. His desires are therefore also pure. I am trying to understand the Gnani's point of view about the world. Is the world perceived after self-realization? Why worry yourself about the world and what happens to it after self-realization? First realize the self. What does it matter if the world is perceived or not? Do you gain anything to help you in your quest by the non-perception of the world during sleep? Conversely, what would you lose now by the perception of the world? It is quite immaterial to the Gnani or Ajnani if he perceives the world or not. It is seen by both, but their viewpoints differ. If the Gnani and the Ajnani perceive the world in like manner, where is the difference between them? Seeing the world, the Gnani sees the self, which is the substratum of all that is seen. The Ajnani, whether he sees the world or not, is ignorant of his true being, the self. Take the instance of moving pictures on the screen in the cinema show. What is there in front of you before the play begins? Merely the screen. On that screen you see the entire show, and for all appearances the pictures are real. But go and try to take hold of them. What do you take hold of? Merely the screen on which the pictures appeared. After the play, when the pictures disappear, what remains? The screen again. So with the self. That alone exists, the pictures come and go. If you hold on to the self, you will not be deceived by the appearance of the pictures. Nor does it matter at all if the pictures appear or disappear. Ignoring the self, the Ajnani thinks the world is real, just as ignoring the screen he sees merely the pictures, as if they existed apart from it. If one knows that without the seer, there is nothing to be seen, just as there are no pictures without the screen, one is not deluded. The Gnani knows that the screen and the pictures are only the self. With the pictures, the self is in its manifest form. Without the pictures, it remains in the unmanifest form. To the Gnani, it is quite immaterial if the self is in the one form or the other. He is always the self. But the Ajnani, seeing the Gnani active, gets confounded. Does Bhagavan see the world as part and parcel of himself? How does he see the world? The self alone is, and nothing else. However, it is differentiated owing to ignorance. Differentiation is threefold. 1, of the same kind. 2, of a different kind. And 3, as parts in itself. The world is not another self similar to the self. It is not different from the self, nor is it part of the self. Is not the world reflected on the self? For reflection there must be an object and an image, but the self does not admit of these differences. Does a Gnani have dreams? Yes, he does dream, but he knows it to be a dream in the same way as he knows the waking state to be a dream. You may call them dream number 1 and dream number 2. The Gnani, being established in the fourth state, Turiya, the supreme reality, he detachedly witnesses the 3 other states, waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, as pictures superimposed on it. For those who experience waking, dream, and sleep, the state of wakeful sleep, which is beyond those 3 states, is named Turiya, the fourth. But since that Turiya alone exists, and since the seeming 3 states do not exist, know for certain that Turiya is itself Turiyatita, that which transcends the fourth. For the Gnani, then, there is no distinction between the 3 states of mind? How can there be, when the mind itself is dissolved and lost in the light of consciousness? For the Gnani, all the 3 states are equally unreal. But the Ajnani is unable to comprehend this, because for him, the standard of reality is the waking state, whereas for the Gnani, the standard of reality is reality itself. This reality of pure consciousness is eternal by its nature, and therefore subsists equally during what you call waking, dreaming, and sleep. To him who is one with that reality, there is neither the mind nor its 3 states, and therefore neither introversion nor extroversion. His is the ever-waking state, because he is awake to the eternal self. His is the ever-dreaming state, because to him the world is no better than a repeatedly presented dream phenomena. His is the ever-sleeping state, because he is at all times without the body am-I consciousness. Is there no Dahatma buddhi, I am the body idea for the Gnani? If, for instance, Sri Bhagavan is bitten by an insect, is there no sensation? There is the sensation, and there is also the Dahatma buddhi. The latter is common to both Gnani and Ajnani, with this difference, that the Ajnani thinks only the body is myself, whereas the Gnani knows all is of the self, or all this is Brahman. If there be pain, let it be. It is also part of the self. The self is Purna, perfect. After transcending the Atma Buddhi, one becomes a Gnani. In the absence of that idea, there cannot be either Kartritva, doership, or Karta, doer. So a Gnani has no karma, that is, a Gnani performs no actions. That is his experience. Otherwise, he is not a Gnani. However, the Ajnani identifies the Gnani with his body, which the Gnani does not do. I see you do things. How can you say that you never perform actions? The radio sings and speaks, but if you open it, you will find no one inside. Similarly, my existence is like the space. Though this body speaks, like the radio, there is no one inside as a doer. I find this hard to understand. Could you please elaborate on this? Various illustrations are given in books to enable us to understand how the Gnani can live and act without the mind, although living and acting require the use of the mind. The potter's wheel goes on turning round even after the potter has ceased to turn it because the pot is finished. In the same way, the electric fan goes on revolving for some minutes after we switch off the current. The prarabdha, predestined karma, which created the body, will make it go through whatever activities it was meant for. But the Gnani goes through all these activities without the notion that he is the doer of them. It is hard to understand how this is possible. The illustration generally given is that the Gnani performs action in some such way as a child that is roused from sleep to eats, but does not remember next morning that it ate. It has to be remembered that all these explanations are not for the Gnani. He knows and has no doubts. He knows that he is not the body, and he knows that he is not doing anything, even though his body may be engaged in some activity. These explanations are for the onlookers who think of the Gnani as one with the body and cannot help identifying him with his body. It is said that the shock of realization is so great that the body cannot survive it. There are various controversies or schools of thought as to whether a Gnani can continue to live in his physical body after realization. Some hold that one who dies cannot be a Gnani, because his body must vanish into air or some other such thing. They put forward all sorts of funny notions. If a man must at once leave his body when he realizes the self, I wonder how any knowledge of the self, or the state of realization, can come down to other men. And that would mean that all those who have given us the fruits of their self-realization in books cannot be considered Jnanis, because they went on living after realization. And if it is held that a man cannot be considered a Gnani so long as he performs actions in the world, and action is impossible with the mind, then not only the great sages who carried on various kinds of work after attaining jnana must be considered ajnanis, but the gods also, and the Ishvara, the supreme personal god of Hinduism, himself, since he continues looking after the world. The fact is that any amount of action can be performed, and performed quite well, by the Gnani, without his identifying himself with it in any way or ever imagining that he is the doer. Some power acts through his body and uses his body to get the work done. Is a Gnani capable of or likely to commit sins? An ajnani sees someone as a Gnani and identifies him with the body because he does not know the self and mistakes his body for the self. He extends the same mistake to the state of the Gnani. The Gnani is therefore considered to be the physical frame. Again, since the ajnani, though he is not the doer, imagines himself to be the doer and considers the actions of the body his own, he thinks the Gnani to be similarly acting when the body is active. But the Gnani himself knows the truth and is not confounded. The state of a Gnani cannot be determined by the ajnani, and therefore the question troubles only the ajnani and never arises for the Gnani. If he is a doer, he must determine the nature of the actions. The self cannot be the doer. Find out who is the doer, and the self is revealed. So it amounts to this: to see a Gnani is not to understand him. You see the Gnani's body and not his jnana. One must therefore be a Gnani to know a Gnani. The Gnani sees no one as an ajnani. All are only Jnanis in his sight. In the ignorant state, one superimposes one's ignorance on the Gnani and mistakes him for a doer. In the state of jnana, the Gnani sees nothing separate from the self. The self is all shining and only pure jnana. So there is no ajnana in his sight. There is an illustration for this kind of illusion or superimposition. Two friends went to sleep side by side. One of them dreamt that both of them had gone on a long journey and that they had had strange experiences. On waking up, he recapitulated them and asked his friend if it was not so. The other one simply ridiculed him, saying that it was only his dream and could not affect the other. So it is with the ajnani, who superimposes his illusory ideas on the others. You have said that the Gnani can be and is active and deals with men and things. I have no doubt about it now. But you say at the same time that he sees no differences. To him, all is one. He is always in the consciousness. If so, how does he deal with differences with men, with things which are surely different? He sees these differences as but appearances. He sees them as not separate from the true, the real, with which he is one. The Gnani seems to be more accurate in his expressions. He appreciates the differences better than the ordinary man. If sugar is sweet and wormwood is bitter to me, he too seems to realize it so. In fact, all forms, all sounds, all taste, etc., are the same to him as they are to others. If so, how can it be said that these are mere appearances? Do they not form part of his life experience? I have said that equality is the true sign of jnana. The very term equality implies the existence of differences. It is a unity that the Gnani perceives in all differences, which I call equality. Equality does not mean ignorance of distinctions. When you have the realization, you can see that these differences are very superficial, that they are not at all substantial or permanent, and what is essential in all these appearances is the one truth, the real. That I call unity. You referred to sound, taste, form, smell, etc. True, the Gnani appreciates the distinctions, but he always perceives and experiences the one reality in all of them. That is why he has no preferences. Whether he moves about or talks or acts, it is all the one reality in which he acts or moves or talks. He has nothing apart from the one supreme truth. They say that the Gnani conducts himself with absolute equality towards all. Yes, friendship, kindness, happiness, and such other bhavas, attitudes, become natural to them. Affection towards the good, kindness towards the helpless, happiness in doing good deeds, forgiveness towards the wicked. All such things are natural characteristics of the Gnani. You ask about Jnanis. They are the same in any state or condition, as they know the reality, the truth. In their daily routine of taking food, moving about, and all the rest, the Jnanis act only for others. Not a single action is done for themselves. I have already told you many times that just as there are people whose profession is to mourn for a fee, so also the Jnanis do things for the sake of others with detachment, without themselves being affected by them. The Gnani weeps with the weeping, laughs with the laughing, plays with the playful, sings with those who sing, keeping time to the song. What does he lose? His presence is like a pure, transparent mirror. It reflects the image exactly as it is. But the Gnani, who is only a mirror, is unaffected by actions. How can a mirror or the stand on which it is mounted be affected by the reflections? Nothing affects them as they are mere supports. On the other hand, the actors in the world, the doers of all acts, the ajnanis, must decide for themselves what song and what action is for the welfare of the world, what is in accordance with the Shastras, and what is practicable. They are said to be sadeha mukta, liberated while still in the body, and videha mukta, liberated at the time of death. There is no liberation. Where are muktas? Do not Hindu Shastras speak of mukti? Mukti is synonymous with the self. Jivan mukti, liberated while still in the body, and videha mukti are all for the ignorant. The Gnani is not conscious of mukti or bandha, bondage. Bondage, liberation, and orders of mukti are all said for an ajnani, in order that ignorance might be shaken off. There is only mukti and nothing else. It is all right from the standpoint of Bhagavan, but what about us? The difference, he and I, are the obstacles to jnana. You said the liberated man is free indeed to act as he pleases, and when he leaves the mortal coil, he attains absolution, but returns not to this birth, which is actually death. This statement gives the impression that although the Gnani takes no birth again on this plane, he may continue to work on subtler planes if he so chooses. Is there any desire left in him to choose? No, that was not my intention. Further, an Indian philosopher in one of his books, interpreting Shankara, says that there is no such thing as videha mukti, for after his death the mukta takes a body of light, in which he remains till the whole of humanity becomes liberated. That cannot be Shankara's view. In verse 566 of Vivekachudamani, he says, after the dissolution of the physical sheath, the liberated man becomes like water poured into water and oil into oil. It is a state in which there is neither bondage nor liberation. Taking another body means throwing a veil, however subtle, upon reality, which is bondage. Liberation is absolute and irrevocable. How can we say that the Gnani is not in two planes? He moves about with us in the world and sees the various objects we see. It is not as if he does not see them. For instance, he walks along. He sees the path he is treading. Suppose there is a chair or table placed across that path. He sees it, avoids it, and goes round. So have we not to admit he sees the world and the objects there? Well, of course he sees the self. You say the Gnani sees the path, treads it, comes across obstacles, avoids them, etc. In whose eyesight is all this? In the Gnani's or yours? He sees only the self, and all in the self. Are there no illustrations given in our books to explain this sahaja, natural state, clearly to us? There are. For instance, you see a reflection in the mirror and the mirror. You know the mirror to be the reality, and the picture in it a mere reflection. Is it necessary that to see the mirror we should cease to see the reflection in it? What are the fundamental tests for discovering men of great spirituality, since some are reported to behave like insane people? The Gnani's mind is known only to the Gnani. One must be a Gnani oneself in order to understand another Gnani. However, the peace of mind which permeates the saint's atmosphere is the only means by which the seeker understands the greatness of the saint. His words, or actions, or appearance are no indication of his greatness, for they are ordinarily beyond the comprehension of common people. Why is it said in scriptures that the sage is like a child? A child and a Gnani are similar in a way. Incidents interest a child only so long as they last. It ceases to think of them after they have passed away. So then, it is apparent that they do not leave any impression on the child, and it is not affected by them mentally. So it is with the Gnani. You are Bhagavan, so you should know when I shall get jnana. Tell me when I shall be a Gnani. If I am Bhagavan, there is no one besides the self. Therefore, no Gnani or Ajnani. If otherwise, I am as good as you are and know as much as yourself. Either way, I cannot answer your question. Coming here, some people do not ask about themselves. They ask, does the Jivan Mukta see the world? Is he affected by karma? What is liberation after being disembodied? Is one liberated only after being disembodied, or even while alive in the body? Should the body of a sage resolve itself in light or disappear from view in any other manner? Can he be liberated though the body is left behind as a corpse? The questions are endless. Why worry oneself in so many ways? Does liberation consist in knowing these things? Therefore I say to them, leave liberation alone. Is there bondage? Know this. See yourself first and foremost.